Welcome back to Disturbed Reality. The Abu Sayyaf Group, ASG, is one of Southeast Asia's most notorious militant organizations, known for its involvement in terrorism, kidnapping, and extortion. Its origins and evolution reflect a complex interplay of historical, political, and socio-economic factors within the Philippines, as well as broader regional and global influences. This video explores the emergence of ASG, examining its ideological roots, early activities, transformation over the decades, and its current state, as well as the depravity that they have recorded on camera. The Abu Sayyaf Group was founded in 1991 by Abdul Razak Abubakar Janjalani, a charismatic preacher and former teacher. Janjalani, a Filipino of Muslim descent, was heavily influenced by his exposure to global Islamic revivalist movements during his studies in the Middle East, particularly in Saudi Arabia and Libya. He fought alongside the Mujahideen in Afghanistan in the 1980s, where he became radicalized and developed connections with international jihadist groups, including Al-Qaeda. The name, Abu Sayyaf, translates to the bearer of the sword in Arabic, reflecting its founder's alignment with extremist interpretations of Islam. Initially, the group positioned itself as a militant organization advocating for an independent Islamic state in the southern Philippines, particularly in the Bangsamoro region of Mindanao and the Sulu archipelago. This aspiration was rooted in centuries of conflict and marginalization experienced by the Muslim population in these areas under Spanish, American, and Filipino rule. In its early years, the ASG primarily framed its struggle as part of a broader global jihad and sought to distinguish itself from other Muslim insurgent groups in the Philippines, such as the Moro National Liberation Front and its splinter group, the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. While the latter mentioned groups pursued nationalist agendas with a focus on autonomy or federalism, ASG adopted a more explicitly Islamist and transnational outlook. The group received funding and training from Al-Qaeda during its formative years, establishing it as part of the global jihadist network. ASG's initial operations included bombings and assassinations targeting government officials and Christian communities. Its most infamous early act of violence was the 1995 attack on the Christian town of Apil in Mindanao, which resulted in over 50 deaths and significant property damage. These actions essentially put ASG on the map, and they emerged as a violent actor capable of mass casualties, setting it apart from other insurgent movements in the country. Following the death of Abdul Razak Janjalani in a clash with the Philippine security forces in 1998, the group experienced significant fragmentation. Leadership disputes and ideological divisions weakened the organization as it lacked a unifying figure akin to Janjalani. During this period, ASG increasingly drifted from its ideological goals and began engaging in criminal activities, particularly kidnap for ransom. These activities became a primary source of funding alongside extortion, piracy, and smuggling. The year 2000 kidnapping of 21 tourists and workers from a Malaysian resort on Sipadan Island marked a turning point in ASG's evolution. This high-profile incident underscored the group's ability to operate beyond Philippine borders and drew international attention. The ransoms collected from such operations, often amounting to millions of dollars, allowed ASG to sustain its activities and recruit new members. While the group maintained some ideological rhetoric, its actions during this period revealed a prioritization of financial gain over religious or political objectives. This shift has led to some analysts to characterize ASG as a gang of bandits rather than a cohesive insurgent or terrorist organization. Nevertheless, its continued use of violence and rhetoric ensured that it remained a significant security threat in the region. Despite its criminal activities, ASG retained its ties to international jihadist networks, particularly Al-Qaeda. In the aftermath of the September 11, 2001 attacks in the United States, ASG was designated as a terrorist organization by the US government and other international bodies. This designation brought increased scrutiny and support for counter-terrorism efforts in the Philippines, including joint operations between Philippine and US military forces under the Visiting Forces Agreement. ASG's links to global jihadism were further reinforced with the rise of Islamic State, IS, in the mid-2010s. Some factions within ASG pledged allegiance to ISIS, adopting its branding and attempting to position themselves as part of a broader caliphate project. This development coincided with an escalation in violence, including the 2016 beheadings of Canadian hostages and the 2017 siege of Marari City. The Marari siege, led by IS-affiliated groups, including ASG factions, represented a significant escalation in the group's ambitions and capabilities. The months-long battle between militants and Philippine security forces resulted in widespread destruction and highlighted the enduring challenge of extremism in Mindanao. While the siege ultimately ended with defeat for the militants, it underscored ASG's ability to adapt and align with evolving jihadist trends. The persistence of ASG can be understood within the broader socio-economic and political context of the southern Philippines. The Bangsamoro region has long been characterized by poverty, underdevelopment, and weak governance, creating fertile ground for insurgency and extremism. The marginalization of Muslim communities, coupled with historical grievances over land and autonomy, has fueled cycles of violence and radicalization. ASG has exploited these conditions to recruit members, often targeting disenfranchised youth and communities with limited economic opportunities. The group also leverages local grievances to legitimize its actions and garner support, even as its activities often harm the same communities it claims to represent. Efforts to address these underlying issues have included the establishment of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, BARMM, in 2019, following decades of negotiations with the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. While the BARM represents a significant step forward addressing the aspirations of Muslim communities, challenges remain in terms of governance, development, and security. The continued presence of groups like ASG highlights the need for comprehensive approaches that go beyond military solutions. Over the years, the Filipino government, with support from international partners, have implemented various counter-terrorism measures to combat ASG. These efforts include military operations, intelligence sharing, and socio-economic development programs aimed at addressing the root causes of extremism. The armed forces of the Philippines have conducted numerous offences against ASG strongholds, resulting in the deaths or capture of key leaders and members. Despite these successes, however, ASG remains a resilient threat. The group's decentralized structure and ability to adapt in changing circumstances have allowed it to survive and evolve. In recent years, it has increasingly relied on smaller, more fragmented cells, making it more difficult to dismantle entirely. The emergence of new threats, such as online radicalization and the potential for cross-border terrorism in Southeast Asia, further complicates efforts to address ASG. Regional cooperation, including initiatives under the Association of Southeast Asian Nations and bilateral agreements, will be crucial in combating these challenges. The Abu Sayyaf Group's origins and evolution ultimately reflect the interplay of local grievances and global jihadist influences. From its beginnings as an ideologically driven movement under the leadership of Janjalani, to its later transformation into a criminal enterprise and its alignment with IS, ASG has demonstrated a remarkable capacity for adaptation. While military and counter-terrorism efforts have weakened the group, its continued presence underscores the need for comprehensive strategies that address the socio-economic and political conditions that underpin extremism. Moving forwards, the challenge lies in sustaining momentum towards peace and development in Mindanao while countering the threat of radicalization. The story of ASG serves as a cautionary tale about the consequences of neglecting marginalized communities and the potential for local conflicts to evolve into global security threats. As the Philippines and its partners continue to confront this complex issue, the lessons of the past will be essential in shaping a more secure and inclusive future. Much like with other religious extremist organisations, such as ISIS, the Abu Sayyaf Group have become notorious for conducting heinous murders on video to push their agenda, and over the years, they have released several of such videos. They are very reminiscent of the old school beheading videos from the Iraq War during the first decade of the new millennium. Today, we will explore Abu Sayyaf's most well-known execution clips, as well as some of the backstory behind them. But nevertheless, let's get into the actual videos. Firstly, we will cover the murder of John Bramwell Ridsdell, who was born on the 9th of September 1947 and was murdered on the 25th of April 2016, making him 68 years old at the time of his murder. Ridsdell's family originated from Britain. His mother was a Scottish nurse and his father was a London-based physician. After moving to Durban, South Africa and then Canada, the Ridsdell family returned to Great Britain for a while before again settling in Canada, first in Vancouver and finally in Calgary. Ridsdell attended Upper Canada College in Toronto, Ontario in the mid-1960s. He then later graduated with a bachelor's degree in political science from Toronto University and a master's degree in political sociology from the London School of Economics. He initially worked as a producer and reporter at CBC Calgary and at the Calgary Herald before joining Petro-Canada in Alberta, a company he represented in Pakistan, Myanmar and Algeria. At the time of the kidnapping, he was retired. Prior to that, he had been working for the mining company TVI Resource Development Philippines Incorporated, a subsidiary of Canada's TVI Pacific, where he was also a consultant. On the 21st of September 2015, John Ridsdell was enjoying some quality time in the Philippines at the Holiday Ocean View Samal Resort on Samal Island in the south of the country. The resort was then ambushed by armed members of Abu Sayyaf. The gunmen disarmed the resort security guards and then abducted 4 people from the resort, the Canadians John Ridsdell and Robert Hall, the resort's Norwegian marina manager Kjartan Sekenstad, and a Filipino woman, Teresita Flor. Following the kidnapping of the 4 people, the kidnappers then issued demands, reportedly around $6.5 million for each of the 3 foreigners seized. They then set a deadline of April of 2016 for the ransoms to be paid, though none of the families of those kidnapped had that type of money, and the international community largely ignored the developing situation. In fact, the Canadian government came under scrutiny for not doing enough to help their own citizens during a time of need. Unfortunately, the deadline for the ransom to be paid passed, and the first victim would be John Bramwell Ridsdell. The date of his murder was the 25th of April 2016. Ridsdell's head was found in a plastic bag in Jolo. A headless body, possibly Ridsdell's, was later found by villagers by a creek near Talepau. Following the murder, a grisly video then soon began to make the rounds all across social media, and it depicted the murder of John. The clip itself is exactly 51 seconds in length. As you play the clip, you see the captive, John Bramwell Ridsdell, and he's kneeling on the ground as 4 militants stand behind him, 3 of which are wearing face coverings, and 2 of which are holding assault rifles. The executioner does not have a face covering and is holding a combat knife. The video has been shot in a jungle during daytime. One of the militants reads out a brief statement, before abruptly, John is kicked to the ground, causing a loud grunt of panic mixed with pain. Quickly, the killer, with a knife, pounces on him, ensuring he can't get up. He grabs John by the hair, and then proceeds to slice the right side of his throat with the knife, which is razor sharp. John groans and growls in pain. It's extremely loud and very disturbing. The killer then works his way to the back of the victim's neck with the knife and cuts down to the spine. He then twists the victim's head so that it is facing left, exposing the huge laceration already cut in the side of the neck. You then hear the sounds of blood bubbling and squelching as John still tries to breathe. You actually see John's hands that are tied behind his back, and his fingers are still frantically moving, indicating that he is still alive. The killer then takes the blade and proceeds to hack down twice, and in just 2 hits, the blade completely cuts through the spinal cord and the beheading is complete. The sounds, albeit brief, are extremely horrible in this video. The clip ends as the executioner picks up John's severed head by the hair. Let's now talk about Robert Hall, the next murder victim following the September 21st kidnapping of the 4 resort goers. Robert Hall was born in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. He was one of 5 siblings and grew up in the city's Midnapore district. He was a welder by trade, but Hall was also an experienced pilot and even an amateur actor. It's worth noting that Robert Hall was in a relationship with the Filipino woman who was kidnapped, Teresita Flor. After the murder of John Ridsdell on the 25th of April 2016, some expected Robert Hall to meet the same fate shortly after, though Abu Sayyaf set a new deadline of June for payment to secure Robert Hall's release. Robert Hall's family attempted to negotiate with Abu Sayyaf directly, managing to offer 1.4 million Canadian dollars to secure his release, though the militants swiftly rejected this offer and communications then seemingly broke down. June came, and by the 13th of that month, Robert Hall had been brutally murdered. Much like was the case with John Ridsdell, a graphic execution video soon made the rounds, detailing Robert Hall's brutal murder. The murder video of Robert Hall is exactly 1 minute and 2 seconds in length. Much like with the previous video, the setting is that of a jungle-type location, and it has been filmed during daytime, much like the previous clip. Robert Hall can be seen kneeling on the ground, with his hands tied behind his back. He's wearing an orange t-shirt, possibly meant to replicate the orange jumpsuits captives wear at Guantanamo Bay. The look on Robert's face is that of utter dejection and defeat. He looks tired, worn out, and totally out of hope. Behind Robert stand 2 Abu Sayyaf fighters, both of which are wearing combat-style pants with dark t-shirts. The militant who speaks is wearing a black ski mask to conceal his identity, though the executioner does not. It seems that the executioner is the same person that is in the previous clip. The militant wearing the ski mask then makes a brief address that lasts around 15 seconds. Robert is then kneed in the back by the executioner, who is holding a combat-style knife to force him onto the ground face first. The killer then pulls Robert by the hair, lifting his head to expose his throat. He then takes the combat knife and proceeds to slice into the victim's neck in the Adam's apple area, cutting extremely deep. So deep that both carotid arteries on either side of the neck are cut simultaneously. Robert coughs and gags as his throat is being cut. Blood then immediately sprays onto the ground like a waterfall, covering the leafy ground blood red. The blood is shooting out at such a rate that it sounds like a tap that has been left fully open. The killer then just continues to hold Robert by the hair, keeping his head lifted so that the blood drains out of his body. You hear the sounds of laboured breathing, followed by the distinctive sound of death rattles, which sound somewhat similar to snoring. Once the flow of blood slows down, the killer resumes to cutting. He slices around the sides and the back of the neck, before soaring through the spinal cord in double quick time. The beheading is complete, and the killer lifts the head up to the camera. He holds it above the torso, and blood drips down, staining the orange shirt. The militants chant Allahu Akbar for several seconds. As the severed head is being held up, it actually looks like the eyes roll downwards, adding to the already horrific nature of the video. The clip ends there. As brutal as Robert's demise was, he barely made a sound during his execution, maintaining a stoic posture until the very end. This may be also due to the point that he had already been held captive for around 9 months by the time of his murder, and he was possibly just tired of his awful ordeal. The other 2 hostages in this incident were actually released by Abu Sayyaf. Teresita Flor was released in the same month as her partner Robert was murdered. The last of his hostage group, Norwegian Kjartan Sekenstad, was released in September of 2016. After the murder of Robert Hall and the release of the 2 remaining captives, Robert's sister would go on to criticise the failure of the government of Canada to do anything decisive or effective to attempt to rescue or save her brother, as well as John. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, if you can enjoy this sort of content. I've been requested to cover Abu Sayyaf for quite some time, and ultimately these were the two most high profile cases that they were kind of involved with. They do have a series of other beheading videos online. One thing I do notice about these videos is the quality of footage is actually pretty high, and the videos themselves kind of remind me of the old school beheadings from the Iraq War. But they have several graphic, super bloody beheading videos. And as of 2024, Abu Sayyaf remain a very dangerous, very powerful group over in the Philippines. But anyway, thank you guys for the support. We are creeping closer to Christmas. Again, I might take a break over the festive period. Not sure how long that will be or what that entails. I'd like to try and get a live stream done over that time period. We'll see. But anyway, guys, link in the description for my Twitter. Also link in the description for my Twitch. And yeah, going into the new year, I do plan on, trying to do some different things with this channel. Not diverting away from disturbing topics, but maybe diverting away from always covering gore. Obviously, as and when I will do, it's always going to be like a hallmark of this channel, But yeah. Anyway, I'm rambling. But anyway, as always, stay safe, and I'll catch you on the next one.